This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Miravis Neo from Syngenta. You can trust Miravis Neo to protect your corn against diseases like gibberella ear rot and tar spot. Miravis Neo is the only corn fungicide solution that delivers yield and quality all in one jug. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.
Good day and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, July the 31st. Yes, July the 31st. We're going to be August already tomorrow. It's incredible how fast the summer disappears. On this episode of the Word, progress. Man, it just, how fast things change is incredible. Rainfall intensity. Wow, does that have impact? Hey, Wheat Pete can be wrong, and we'll then, after that, we'll try to do agronomy answers and not be wrong again. Well, everybody gets wrong once in a while, and it's not being wrong that's a problem. It's how you correct it after that absolutely matters. Let's go! Yes, change! Oh, never has it been driven home more succinctly, more impactfully than my grandson, our grandson Callum, 3 years old. He's visiting here from London, England. And so Grandpa and Gram get the toys out and say, here, Callum, here's a telephone, play with the telephone. And he looks at it and he says, what is that? Because Callum, at 3 years old, has never seen one of those old rotary dial phones that you would pick up the receiver off of the cradle. He had no clue what that is. And I just thought, wow, that is amazing. He's only 3, but he's seen lots of cell phones. He's never seen one of those other phones. And it just drives home how fast things are changing. Our whole scientific basis, our whole technology is just changing at an ever-increasing rate of speed. So when you're talking to some of these young agronomists, realize that you might have to back up and give them some background, because things that old guys like me and maybe some of you listening take for granted, they have never seen before. It's just absolutely amazing. Yes, we're going to move on and talk about rainfall intensity. Oh my gosh. The intensity of the rainfall that we have been getting when you sit in the middle of a thunderstorm is just horrendous. And it has happened all of June, all of July. It's just where it happens changes little bits, but the wet areas are staying wet. The dry areas are crying for rainfall. Mark at Ripley, Brett at Wallenstein just going, come on, bring on some moisture. Meanwhile, Mike at London getting 4 inches in an hour on Tuesday. Thamesville getting 4 inches in an hour on Monday. Some areas north of London, 14 inches of rain in July. The intensity of these rainstorms is just incredible. And when you get under the middle of one, by the way, Johnson also got a whole bunch of rain at Lucan. My wheat stubble, yet again, with lakes in the field. And I'm just going, man, how can that be? But the challenge, and the challenge I want to talk about, because the intensity of the rainstorms is incredible, but we know because the air is holding more moisture. I talked about that last week. 1 degree Celsius warmer, 7% more moisture in the air. It means these intense rainfalls are likely to happen more often, particularly in our part of the world, because we are actually going to get wetter rather than drier as the temperature warms. We can argue about it. The reality is it is warmer. We are seeing these heavier thunderstorms. And so Mike pointing out that the erosion that happens, I've always said that 80% of the erosion happens in the non-growing season. Why is that? There's no plants there to hold the soil in place, to intercept those atomic bomb raindrops, because that's what they are like on bare soil. They basically hit that soil almost with the force of an atomic bomb. There's no crop in the non-growing season. 80% of the erosion happens then. But when we look at some of our crops that don't canopy quickly, like edible beans, like some of the horticultural crops, and we get these intense storms, probably 95 or 98% of the erosion happens in particular rainfall events each year, and we are seeing that this year in spades, that you just get these 4-inch thunderstorms, and Mike saying flat ground, edible beans, the amount of soil movement, because there's nothing between the row, it's been too wet, they haven't canopied, and the water starts to trail between the rows. It's got to move somewhere, even on flat ground. Erosion this year has been 100% horrendous, just horrendous, even to the point of silting in local lakes and ditches, drainage ditches. We have to find ways to do better. Yes, it is definitely a leap year. Lots of growers saying, Johnson, it's a leap year. It's an anomaly. It's a one-off. No, it is a leap year, but these intense rainstorms seem to be much more frequent, at least in Johnson's estimation. And I really think that as agriculturalists, we need to step back and say, what can we do to keep our soil in place? Because it is our most valuable resource, and way too much of it in these intense storms is moving. So think about things, even like strip till into a cover crop or into corn residue in between the corn rows, and planting twin row edibles on top of that corn residue. Would that not be an option to grow good edible beans? We'll have to deal with the corn stalks. I get there's some issues, but I really want to challenge everyone, because the amount of erosion this year, it's absolutely cruel. So hey, here's an opportunity for you, because the off-calf program opens at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So that's Thursday, August the 1st, 9 a.m. You don't have to rush in to get it, but there's lots of opportunity there that to try things to help you stop that erosion, things like cover crops, things like fertilizer sources. So have a look at that program. Try to think of ways to do better. And as well, get out and join your local tours. So on that note, the Elgin Soil and Crop Improvement Association Summer Tour on August the 8th. Wheat Pete will be there. It will be a KSE, a knowledge sharing event as well. So there's lots of those out there, not just Elgin. There'll be Middlesex, there'll be Oxford, there'll be, every soil and crop almost, plus lots of agribusiness and corn seed companies, soybean seed companies will be having tours. Get out and participate, because you will learn new ideas that will help us all do better, not only on erosion, but on everything from like every part of agronomy. It's just ongoing education, so critical in the world we live in, because it's changing so fast. All right, one last quick note before I move on, and that is around safety. So just got a note that a grower was killed in a tractor rollover. I know things are tough in terms of trying to get stuff done between rainstorms, but please, please, please think twice, act once, slow down. If you're going down the road in a tractor, please watch the road. I'm a little frustrated how many growers I pass tractors going the other way on the road, and they're always looking at their cell phone, not looking at the road. Yeah, come on, people. Let's be safe. Let's all be here to celebrate Christmas and New Year's and all of that stuff. All right, I got to move on because I'm running out of time already. Jean-Marc, you are correct. So I said last week that it was 1% organic matter for every 10% clay. And Jean-Marc, Essex County, heavy clay soil, said, Johnson, I think you are off your rocker. So I went back to my notes, and yes, and Dr. Dave also reached out and said, Peter, I think you're a little low there. So in my notes from long, long ago, it just shows memories can get pretty thin. It's 1% organic carbon for every 10% clay. So that's actually 1.7% organic matter. So Jean-Marc, let's give you the 2%. Let's say 2% organic matter for every 10% clay. That's the target in terms of of stopping erosion, getting better soil structure, getting better infiltration, all of those things that we want to do. And John Mark, thanks for pointing it out, because otherwise that would have gone uncorrected. Hey, let's talk quickly about wheat yields, because man, there are some amazing wheat yields out there. Chuck, up in northern Ontario, 140 bushel per acre, at least spots in the field. Chuck saying third year in a row of bin busting yields on winter wheat in northern Ontario. Johnson was up in the Rainy River District doing a compaction day with the compaction team, Ian McDonald, Alex Berry, Margaret May, Kevin Barnum, lots of, just a great time up there. But yeah, absolutely some real opportunity up there to do an awesome job with winter wheat. And not a lot of winter wheat growing yet, because it's just a bit hard to get it planted on time. Meanwhile, down here in the deep southwest, Dean with a record 128 bushels per acre. And I've worked with Dean just a little bit through the word and through email. And he made the decision to tile drain the farm. He made the decision to manage wheat like a crop. And this year, record wheat yields. That's awesome. Dave sending me a text saying, hey, Peter, yeah, we'll build you up a little bit, because in that field where we had wheat with red clover beside where we had edible beans last year, the whole field's in corn this year. The wheat with red clover corn is 18 inches taller than the corn planted on the edible bean ground. Everything else is the same, and it's just like, yeah, baby, wheat in the rotation. It makes a difference. All right, Woody sending me a note saying, hey, Peter, I mentioned to you that I had corn planted late April, kind of the first corn in the area, and the tassel didn't emerge 100%, and we had poor pollination. Well, we went back to that field, and it's not poor pollination. What it really is two-stage pollination. So on the cobs, we have kernels that are at the sweet corn stage. They're yellow, they're milky, they're just ready to eat for sweet corn. The rest of the kernels are at the blister stage. So what's going on with that two-stage pollination? I talked to my great friend, the corn guru, Greg Stewart. He is shaking his head saying, man, we got to look at that, see if we can, was there insect feeding on the silks? Did the silks not grow? But we don't have the answer there. What I really want to point out, though, is that this year, the emergence of silks is all over the map. Last year, the silks were almost all coming out 4 to 5 days prior to the tassel. We're trying to time corn fungicides right now, and we still have the late planted corn to put a fungicide on. If you're in the deep southwest, tar spot is out there. I think we need to spray late planted corn as well, but you can't go by the tassels. In some cases, we have silks before the tassels. Adam's been out scouting. Sometimes there's a 5-inch silk before the corn tassels and sheds any pollen. Other times, the silk is coming out the same time as the tassel. But in some of the stressed corn, and this goes back to, before we put good stress tolerance into our corn hybrids, there was this thing called the tassel silk interval, and you could predict yields by how much the tassel emerged before the silk emerged. The bigger the difference, the lower the yield. Man, in some of the stressed areas of the fields, the silks are well behind the tassels. So if you're going to spray a fungicide, it's green silk, green silk, green silk. Try to wait for as much silk emergence as you can in these variable fields, because you'll get way better control if you can manage to wait that long. Hey, the other thing Dave noticed as he sprayed his corn was lots of ladybugs in the pollen that ended up on the sprayer. And by the way, as soon as I see ladybugs, that is an indicator. I know I have or I know there's some food source. You don't get ladybugs if you don't have a food source. And then Nick sends a nice little picture of his cover crop sorghum just loaded with corn leaf aphids. Chris Stefanzo and Tracy Bowdy talking about corn leaf aphids in cornfields. But in general, We have lots of ladybugs working on them. With this moisture, the chances of having a big problem with corn leaf aphids in field corn is really remote. I don't think we need to spray for them. By the way, those ladybugs can also feed on western bean cutworm eggs and larvae, the young larvae. Adam out scouting for me, and again, finding the odd western bean cutworm egg mass, not anywhere close to threshold, but definitely out there. Those ladybugs in the corn crop, that is a good thing. And so far, unless you're in the sweet corn deal, you don't really need to control for them. Soybean aphids, on the other hand, continue to spread in eastern Ontario. More and more growers finding them above threshold. When I was in Emo, saw a ladybug in the soybeans. I thought, well, okay, there's something here. There's probably soybean aphids. I wasn't finding them. A grower just on the tour grabbed a top leaf, pulled it up, and sure enough, soybean aphids out there. Nowhere close to threshold. But yes, use those ladybugs as an indicator. Okay, next, lots of questions about cover crops and when to plant them. And Dave sending me a picture from one of his growers saying, what's going on here? Because last year, this grower on this side of the field, it's an aerial photograph of the field, and you can clearly see the line where one half of the field is way better than the other half of the field. Guess what? The half of the field that was better had no oat cover crop, oat and pea cover crop. The half of the field that is much worse had an oat pea cover crop. And the discussion went like this. The oat pea cover crop was supposed to be a forage crop. It got to head. It was too wet in the fall. The grower couldn't harvest it, decided to take the disc ripper into it and work it in, and now this year the corn crop is just a mess. So this whole cover crop discussion really is about how to get benefit and how to avoid screw-ups, because I don't want to hurt anybody's corn crop. First, we know that if you're going to plant oats only as a cover crop, the work by Dr. Dave at Ridgetown campus, we want to apply some nitrogen, at least 30 pounds and maybe as much as 50 pounds. And that's not generally a big problem, because after wheat is also when we need to look at fertility and replacing what we have removed. So do those calculations. In Johnson's own case, with 200 plus bushel corn, 60 bushel soybeans, 100 plus bushel wheat, and straw removal, over the 3 years, that's 200 pounds of phosphate and 200 pounds of potash that gets removed on every acre. And it's not exact because there is definitely differences in the field, but averages, that's what it would be. So then you back out what you have applied with MAP with your wheat seed, with your 2x2 band on your corn crop, and you make it up after the wheat crop comes off. If that ends up being a couple hundred pounds of MAP, that's 20 or 25 pounds of your nitrogen. You can then top it up with a little bit of urea, get it into the range where we get good oat growth, and that will reduce any yield drag that we sometimes see growing corn following that oat crop. A really interesting finding from Dr. Dave there. And then either time your planting date so the crop doesn't get too big. Some growers like to plant on, let's say, August the 20th, because that way the oats never get to head, and then they take them out late fall. My own preference is actually to plant as soon as you can. Use the good sunshine throughout August. Oats don't like heat, so the growth might be a little bit more spindly, and you might see a little bit more rust show up in that crop. So try to grow an oat crop that has good natural tolerance to crown rust. That's the problem that we run into in the heat of the summertime. But then that oat crop gets to the flag leaf stage in September, and if we take it out with glyphosate, we'll get much, much better control of things like sow thistle and wild carrot and bindweed and some of those perennial weeds that we're really trying to take control of. There are those two options, but just from that perspective, do what you need to do. But man, don't let it get up big and not harvest it, because that, if it goes to head, it just is a negative all the way around, which we don't want that negative. Okay, real quickly here, just to finish up, Aiden, underseeded alfalfa into winter wheat. It really doesn't work. We struggle to get red clover to work. Alfalfa is a weaker seedling, and so winter wheat just seems to be too competitive. If you try to plant the alfalfa with the winter wheat in the fall, it rarely gets a big enough plant to survive the winter. That means you spring seed it on the frost, and yeah, it's just, try it, but it really doesn't work as well as we would like. Tony and Bernie on fleabane control, either ahead of oats or into red clover. Realistically, the fleabane is glyphosate tolerant, so you can spray red clover with 0.4 to 0.5 liters per acre of MCPA ester. It has to be ester, not amine. You'll wilt the clover, but you won't kill it. It'll come back. You will prevent that fleabane from going to seed. So that would be the recommendation there. Scott, you saw lots of wheat regrowth coming after you harvested your wheat. You know, when it's a wet fall, we just get that. It's not that surprising. The main head was holding back those tillers, even though those tillers had developed earlier. You harvest the crop, that main head, that apical dominance disappears. If the root system has lots of moisture and is still somewhat alive, those tillers can absolutely regrow. Hey, Rick, the black stems. So this is one of the things, I'll finish on this note. One of the things that we are seeing more of this year, and in talking with Ellen Sperry and Albert Tenuta and Joanna Fallings, we do see this from time to time. It is often related more to wet years, but you will see wheat heads that are 6 inches or roughly 6 inches above the rest of the crop. The stem is often black. The head is standing straight up, and there is no seed in that particular head. This year, in some fields, we're seeing much more of it than we would like. Joanna Fallings trying to sort out, is it Pythium? What is the root disease? Because those plants have poor root systems. What is the disease that's doing that? But we haven't got it all sorted out yet. At the end of the day, it is a wet year factor. If we find out more, we'll let you know. And with that, I have talked yet again way too long. On behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture, this is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, July the 31st. Hey, keep the questions, keep the comments, keep the feedback coming so that I can talk too long yet again when we get into August of 2024. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Miravis Neo from Syngenta. You can trust Miravis Neo to protect your corn against diseases like gibberella ear rot and tar spot. Miravis Neo is the only corn fungicide solution that delivers yield and quality all in one jug. Visit syngenta.ca for more info.